Okay, let's dive right into this. Today's explainer is covering one of the absolute most famous and honestly, most enduring stories in all of human history. We are talking about the fall of Troy. So, using Historon1's brilliant documentary prompt as our guide, we're going to break down the legendary tactics, the incredible psychological warfare, and then we're going to separate the thrilling ancient mythology from the cold, hard archaeological facts. Let's journey all the way back to the late Bronze Age, shall we?
Just let those words sink in for a second. Brute force had failed. So the Greeks turned to something far more dangerous: deception. For years, the Greek and Trojan forces had been locked in this grinding, exhausting, bloody stalemate. You really have to try and feel the heavy reality of that sheer desperation. Imagine thousands of warriors camped out on a foreign coastline. Their supplies are running dangerously low and morale is just plummeting. They had literally thrown everything they had at the walls of Troy, and it just wasn't enough. It's out of this profound, dragging exhaustion that a critical pivot in military strategy is born. They finally realize they can't win this with muscle. They have to win it with their minds.
To really understand why they needed a trick in the first place, we first have to understand what they were up against. Picture a breathtaking aerial view of ancient Troy in the late Bronze Age. It sits there, surrounded by these rugged hills and distant mountains. You've got this golden sunlight cutting right through an atmospheric haze, lighting up the dust kicked up by thousands of feet. Down by the coastline is the massive Greek encampment. Wooden ships, leather armor, the smoke of countless campfires. But looming over all of it is the imposing, completely impregnable reality of Troy's defenses. This was a fortress that the Greeks, despite their huge numbers and bronze weapons, simply could not breach.
Now, what's really interesting about this architectural breakdown is the exact nightmare the Greeks were facing. It made brute force entirely impossible. We're talking about massive stone walls topped with high stone watchtowers, where Trojan soldiers could easily patrol and spot literally any incoming assault. And inside, the city wasn't just some open field. It was completely packed with defensible mud brick structures and these narrow, winding, labyrinthine streets. These are realistic Bronze Age architectural features, meaning even if the Greeks somehow managed to batter down a section of the outer wall, they'd just be funneled right into a meat grinder of tight alleyways. Traditional siege warfare just wasn't going to work here.
So what do you do when you can't break the walls down? Well, you find a way to make your enemy open the doors for you. Imagine this scene. It's the dead of night. Greek commanders are gathered secretly inside a tent. They're standing around this heavy wooden table, huddled over a parchment-like ancient map that's illuminated only by the flickering, dancing light of oil lamps. Their faces are tense, determined, casting these long shadows on the canvas. And in hushed tones, pointing directly at the city gates drawn on that map, they begin to plot a deception so absolutely audacious, it's going to echo through eternity.
Let's see how this builds, because this wasn't just a physical trap. It was a literal masterclass in psychological warfare that unfolded in 4 brilliant steps. Step 1, construct a massive wooden horse. Step 2, hide a small strike force of elite warriors inside its belly. Step 3, and honestly this is where the genius really lies, abandon the camp entirely to fake a complete Greek retreat. And finally, step 4, leave the horse behind as a mysterious, almost irresistible offering. They are playing directly on the Trojans' exhaustion, their desperate desire for the war to be over, and of course, their religious reverence.
Bringing this illusion to life was a monumental task. I want you to almost hear the creaking of the heavy timber, the harsh scraping of tools against thick wood, the snap of those thick ropes pulling the joints together. Craftsmen working tirelessly under torchlight, timber shavings are covering the ground everywhere. And here's a fun fact. Working exclusively with bronze tools meant this required a staggering amount of manual labor in time. This was built to look like a realistic, monumental ancient structure, an awe-inspiring piece of Bronze Age engineering, not some magical fantasy creature. It had to be convincing enough to fool an entire city that had been on high alert for years.
So finally, the trap is set. The dawn breaks over the Trojan coastline, but something feels completely wrong. The mist rolls in over this eerily quiet abandoned beach. The massive Greek camp? It's totally empty. In the far distance, you can just make out the Greek ships disappearing toward the horizon. And there, standing completely alone in the morning dust, is this enormous wooden horse. You can just feel the suspense hanging in the air as Trojan soldiers cautiously crack open their gates and step outside. The war seems to be over. But would they actually accept this strange offering?
So, the crucial point here is that the Trojans were completely torn. Right within the city walls, a fatal divide emerged. On one side, you have this triumphant celebration. Citizens are cheering, they fully believe the Greeks have surrendered and left behind a monument of their defeat. But on the other side, there is deep suspicion and real fear. Trojan priests and wise elders are desperately warning the crowds, literally begging them not to trust this bizarre Greek offering. The tension between the incredible relief of peace and that gut instinct of danger is just palpable.
Tragically, the desire for peace wins out over caution, and this is the fatal error. Crowds of celebrating citizens, musicians, and soldiers gather up these thick ropes. Using heavy wooden mechanisms, they heave and pull this enormous structure toward the city. You really have to appreciate the tragic irony here. The Trojans spent 10 whole years keeping the Greeks out, only to manually wheel them right through their own front door, cheering the entire way. Torches light up the dusk, music fills the air, and slowly, incredibly, they pull the belly full of their enemies right through their massive stone gateway.
Eventually, the celebrations die down. The torches burn out, night falls on Troy. The city becomes incredibly quiet, with only the moonlight illuminating the ancient rooftops. The atmosphere shifts from joyful to incredibly dark and profoundly ominous. Inside the quiet, sleeping city rests the colossal wooden horse. And inside that dark, cramped wooden belly, imagine the tense hands of the hidden Greek warriors gripping their cold bronze weapons in pitch blackness, waiting in utter silence for the perfect moment to strike.
When the moment comes, the trap springs shut with terrifying precision. Hour 1. Out on the dark sea. The Greek ships have turned around, their oars moving silently through the moonlit waves, returning to the coast. Hour 2. Back inside the sleeping city, a secret hatch opens, and those hidden warriors silently emerge from the wooden horse, dropping right into the dark streets. Hour 3. They light torches, signaling over the walls to the advancing coastline army. And Hour 4. The massive city gates, the supposedly impregnable gates of Troy, are thrown wide open from the inside.
The Greek army pours in, and the city instantly descends into total chaos. Those narrow ancient streets that were supposed to defend the Trojans, they now trap them. We see burning wooden structures, thick smoke rising above the rooftops, collapsing timber beams, and scattered bronze shields completely abandoned in the panic. Without even needing to picture the graphic violence, the atmospheric tragedy is just overwhelming. The majestic Bronze Age fortress of Troy is completely swallowed by fire and darkness, destroyed not by a battering ram, but by a wooden trick.
Okay, let's step out of the legend for a moment and pull the curtain back. Everything we just explored is absolutely one of the most thrilling narratives ever passed down through human history. But as focused learners of history, we need to shift our perspective now. We are stepping out of the myth and looking directly at the archaeological reality. Because the story of the Trojan Horse, as cinematic and brilliant as it is, requires us to clearly distinguish between the Homeric mythology we just visualized and the historically verified evidence we can actually prove today.
And this brilliantly illustrates how the archaeological record draws a very clear line in the sand. First up, the location. The legend tells of an invincible mythic city, but archaeological fact confirms there is a verified Bronze Age settlement in modern-day Turkey that corresponds to Troy. Second, the fall. The legend gives us the epic deception, while archaeology gives us actual destruction layers, burnt stone and rubble, proving the city was violently destroyed. But then we get to the trap itself. The legend gives us the massive wooden horse. Archaeology? Well, that remains an unproven literary invention. There is zero physical proof a giant wooden horse ever actually sat outside those gates.
So, the horse belongs to what historians call literary tradition. Basically, these are written or oral stories passed down through generations, often containing symbolic or mythical elements that archaeology just can't confirm. But here's exactly why that matters. Even if historians can never prove a giant wooden trap was physically built, the Trojan horse stands as an eternal symbol. It is a powerful, enduring metaphor for deception, for the dangers of hubris, and for the harsh reality that sometimes the greatest threats are the ones we willingly invite into our own homes.
The way this specific story has survived is a beautiful artistic journey all its own. Back in the 8th century BCE, the legend was kept alive through ancient Greek oral tales and painted onto pottery. By the 5th century BCE, it was immortalized in classical artwork and ancient manuscripts. Picture dust particles floating in golden light over weathered parchment pages. Fast forward to the 19th century CE, when the actual archaeological ruins were finally excavated. And today, right now in the 21st century, modern historical research continues to analyze this incredible intersection of myth and reality.
Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought to ponder today. Even if the Trojan horse was never built exactly as the legend describes, why does this ancient tale of deception still captivate us thousands of years later? What is it about the blend of human ingenuity, tragic folly,
and legendary scale that keeps us coming back to the walls of Troy. I'll let you think on that. Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating topic with me in today's Explainer. If you want to keep diving into the incredible realities behind the world's greatest stories, make sure you follow Historon1 for more history and facts. Until next time, keep learning.